Hello and welcome back to the channel, guys. It's your boy Chimavin, and in today's video we are going to be breaking down as concisely as possible what is, in my opinion, the most crucial grammatical element in Spanish, and that is verb conjugation. It's a very spicy topic. However, please bear in mind that Spanish has 17 conjugations, which we are not going to be covering in this video. So for this video, we're going to focus majorly on the present tense, which ultimately, once you learn the pattern for the present tense, you can always apply that same pattern to the rest of the conjugation charts. But guys, if you like hearing me slice and dice the grammar intricacies of Spanish, please do me a favor and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. Muchas gracias. So the very first step is learning your subject pronouns. This is the first and the easiest step. So we're going to try to blitz through this, okay? All right, so I is yo. You is tú. He is él. Now, don't confuse this with the definite article él. When spoken, they sound the same, but when written, él, as in he, carries an accent mark on top, all right? So she is ella. We is nosotros. You all, like if you're speaking to a group of people, that is vosotros. Now mind you, V in Spanish is pronounced like a B. So this is like vosotros. And they is ellos. Now, a couple of things to bear in mind. If the we in question is a group of women, it becomes nosotras and not nosotros, okay? But if there's one man in the mix, just one man and like 99 women, it becomes nosotros. Yeah, I'm very sorry. Yeah, Spanish is a bit sexist. All right, so the same logic applies to vosotros. If you're speaking to like a group of women, it becomes vosotras. And finally, if we're referring to like a group of women like they, that is ellas, all right? Now, like so many other languages, Spanish actually has like levels of formality too. So if you want to speak to someone formally, you understand, there's actually like a particular subject pronoun to use. What we learned, like tú, is actually very informal, that you use with your friends and families and work colleagues too, kind of. But if you're speaking to your boss, for example, or someone of authority, or let's say you just met someone on the street for the first time, you actually use usted. Usted. That is the formal you. And in the same vein, if you want to refer to, you're speaking to like a group of people in a very formal setting, you use ustedes. 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 There's a final subject pronoun which I'm not going to be covering because like hell no, like, and that is boss, because it's only used in Argentina and Uruguay. So maybe we might do another video to actually cover this, but for now, on to the next step. Sorry. So here we're going to talk about verb endings in Spanish. And if you go back to your primary and secondary school education, an infinitive usually refers to a verb in its most basic form. So an example would be to speak, to listen, to write, etc. In Spanish, all infinitives usually end in three ways: AR, ER, or IR. So we are going to take some examples. An example of an AR verb would be hablar, the verb to speak. And an ER verb would be comer, the verb to eat. And finally, IR, we have vivir, the verb to live. So these are the three verb endings that we are going to be working with in the conjugation table. Now, step 3 is where the real hard work begins. And we're going to start by looking at the regular conjugations. So, as the name implies, a regular conjugation means that it does not deviate from the usual expected pattern. And we're going to take it one verb ending at a time, starting with AR verb ending. And I have good news. 80% of the time, AR verbs are regular conjugations.
Nice.
That is such a relief because irregular conjugations can be a real pain in the So, down to the conjugation. So what we are going to be doing is we're going to take out the AR suffix ending and switch it with something else, okay? What we switch it with changes with the subject pronoun. So for example, Joe, which is I, you take out the AR and put O. So it becomes yo hablo. Okay? We are going to replicate the same with tú, but instead of O, we're going to put AS. And tú is tú hablas. Yo hablo, tú hablas. For él and ella, we take out the AR and put an A. It becomes habla. So yo hablo, tú hablas, él, ella habla. For nosotros, we add amos. So it becomes nosotros hablamos. For vosotros, we add ais. So it becomes vosotros habláis. And with ellos, you add an. So it becomes ellos hablan. Now, if we just look at these verb endings, that is what you're always going to be adding for all regular AR verbs. Okay? It never changes. In the present tense, it never changes. All right, so we're going to switch over to the ER verbs. And it's more or less the same idea. The only difference now is that in the ones where you add like an A, like an AS, you add an ES instead. Okay, so we're going to breeze through it now. I eat will become yo como. You take out the ER and put an O, yo como. For tú, you take out the ER and put an ES. Okay, so it's tú comes. And we follow the same pattern. For él, ella, is él, ella come. Nosotros comemos. Vosotros coméis, and ellos comen. And finally, we have IR verbs, which is kind of similar to ER in how it conjugates. Unfortunately, most IR verbs are irregular verbs. And even the regular IR verbs conjugate in a very non-regular way. To explain this, we need to understand the 2-3-6 principle. And by 2-3-6, I'm referring to the second, third, and sixth subject pronouns, which are tú, él, and ella, which are basically one, and ellos. Okay? And the whole idea is that these 2-3-6 subject pronouns, they actually conjugate like as if they were ER verbs. So let's go through the IR conjugation very quickly. We have yo vivo, which is like pretty standard stuff. And now we have tú vives. If we were to use the normal pattern, it would have been tú vivis, but no, it's vives. You can see how the second pronoun, which is a tú, conjugates like an ER verb. So we're going to do the same thing for the third, which is él and ella. Él, ella, vive. Okay? And now we have nosotros vivimos. You can see how it reverts to the original pattern. And now we have vosotros vivís and ellos viven. Now the sixth, ellos viven, the same technique as the second and the third. You conjugate it as if it were an ER verb. All right, so that's basically everything for the regular conjugations. However, it's very important to also learn the conjugations for the formal words, okay? We already spoke about them, usted and ustedes, which is the formal singular you and the formal plural you. All right, so all I have to say about this is that usted and ustedes, they conjugate like as if they were the third party. And what I mean is that you have to use the L and AR conjugation for these two. So if we look at AR, you have usted habla, and ustedes hablan. And we're going to do the same thing for ER, which is usted come and ustedes comen. And finally, for IR, usted vive and ustedes viven. So it's basically the exact same conjugation as the third party, él, ella, and ellos. Finally, we've arrived at the shores of the very scary irregular verb conjugation. And if I'm being honest, it's actually not as difficult as it may seem. You only need to have two things at the back of your mind. Number one, the 2-3-6 principle we just reviewed in the previous section. And number two, vowel shift in Spanish. Now, most times in Spanish, when there's a vowel shift, it's basically just to help the easier pronunciation of the word. And there are basically two types of vowel shifts in Spanish. We have the E, the letter E to IE vowel shift, and the letter O to UE vowel shift. Once you're able to just always remember this, you are good to go, because the conjugation is basically the same as the previous section we just reviewed. All right, so let's run through what we just highlighted now, starting with AR verbs. So we're going to look at two irregular verbs, pensar and encontrar, to think and to find. And, well, what I just stated, where there's an E, you change it to an IE. And where there's an O, you change it to a UE. So, for yo, instead of yo penso, you say yo pienso. And for encontrar, instead of yo encontro, you say yo encuentro. Okay, so that's the whole idea. And the same logic applies to the remaining of the subject pronouns. You have tú, instead of tú pensas, you say tú piensas. And instead of tú encontras, you say tú encuentras. And that's the whole logic. So it's yo pienso, tú piensas, él, ella piensa, nosotros pensamos, vosotros pensáis, and ellos piensan. You can see how the 2, 3, 6 logic still applies. The subject pronouns 1, 4, and 5 remain the same. They are always regular. So basically that's the whole gimmick behind irregular conjugation in Spanish. And now we're going to look at ER and IR irregular conjugation to wrap up this rather long video. So for ER, we have the verbs querer and poder, to want and to be able to. And so we say yo quiero, I want, and yo puedo, I can. Notice the IE and the UE vowel shifts. Now, tú quieres, tú puedes. You want and you can. Él, ella quiere, él, ella puede. Nosotros queremos, nosotros podemos. Vosotros queréis, vosotros podéis. And finally, ellos quieren, and ellos pueden. So I'm basically just trying to highlight the vowel shifts that we talked about, and also to always have at the back of your mind the 2-3-6 principle. Now for irregular IR verbs, the major difference is that there is usually no vowel shift for the E. So if it's a verb like pedir, for example, pedir, the E doesn't change to IE, it just changes to I. And so we say yo pido. Instead of saying yo piedo, we just say yo pido. But curiously enough, the O to UE vowel shift kind of remains intact. So we still say yo duermo, I sleep, from the verb dormir. Okay, so we have yo pido and yo duermo, and that's basically it. I'm not going to go through the whole chart for this IR verb ending, but you basically get the idea. The main concept you need to hammer into your head is basically 2-3-6 principle and the vowel shifts to both of them. And by the way, Spanish also has some semi-regular hybrid type of verbs where the conjugation is regular and constant for the most part, except the yo conjugation. And we are going to take some notable examples here. Example number 1, tener, hacer, and poner. We actually say yo tengo, yo hago, yo pongo. And you can see how it ends in a G-O and not just an O, as is the case usually. And example number 2, we have conocer. And we don't say yo conozco, we say yo conozco. It ends in a Z-C-O. And another prime example would be estar and dar, which end in O-Y. And so we say yo estoy and yo estoy and yo doy. So you can see how these verbs are kind of like hybrid in the sense that like the conjugation is different for the yo. And you kind of just have to memorize them along the way. There's no real pattern to these hybrid verbs. And I think the last hybrid verb we'll be looking at is saber. We don't say yo sabo, we say yo sé. I know, yo sé. Jose Mourinho. That's a very dry joke. All right, the very last thing we're going to be looking at is the most irregular verbs in Spanish. These ones follow no pattern whatsoever. You have to just memorize it as it is, and yeah, that's it. And we're not actually going to be looking at the conjugation in this video, but I'm going to tell you which verbs they are, and that is ser and ir, the verb to be and the verb to go. So yeah, I think I've been able to touch on all the important points regarding verb conjugation in Spanish. I do have to say, conjugation is rote memorization, and it's paramount that you're constantly reciting it to yourself, practicing in your head whenever you're driving, washing the plates, or taking a shower. Just keep on practicing. That's the only way to internalize it through space-time repetition. And guys, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a fun one, and see you guys in the next one. I'm Batman.